Pretty cool. Hi, welcome to another video. Today we're gonna go through the top 13 features of the draft tool. Yeah, I started to make a video, or at least some content, and just kept adding more and more examples. So now I'm basically just gonna take you through the draft tool and all the various ways that you can use it that might not be so obvious. And what do those strange little options do? Number one, typically the draft tool starts off with a length mode, a default length mode, and you're basically specifying the actual length of the flange. Switch that to projected, and what that does, we'll just use this orange surface as a reference, is it basically is a projected dimension, almost like an offset. So for example, if we come in here and we just start, cranking the angle on this, we're still gonna have the same depth and the length of it automatically increases. Number two is drafting to a surface. So often, when we're creating a draft, and we'll just grab this, let's switch that to normal, add a little length. It's just a common length over that. We can make it variable, which we'll cover later in the video, but often, you're trying to match kind of a shape, and maybe the shape that you're trying to match has a irregular shape, or it's, in this case, it's getting smaller on one side, larger on the other. I can say to surface, I select my surfaces, hit go, and it matches that surface with that draft, which is just amazing. So I've used this to match shape as I have here, or to meet all the way to the center line from maybe a part line. So I can cut all the way through it, have it stop at the center line automatically by putting a surface there. Number three is great. Often, we're using the draft tool in order to create parts that can be pulled out of a tool. And the dipole direction can be described with a vector, and we want to make sure all of our drafts are built with that vector so they're all consistent. So I'm going to just select one of our drafts here, and I'll hit next. I'll select the next one. I'll choose our vector, which automatically selects the picked option, and I hit go. And now that vector is controlling all of these parts, and we know that we have the proper draft angle to pull this out of a tool. Number four, the classic. So we have a surface that's, kind of sweeping away from us. Engineering, let's say, gave us a dipole direction in X, essentially, going car forward. But if we were to simply come in here, curve, vector, two surfaces turned on. So classic. So we have this part that basically, as it goes card forward, you can see it starts to skew. And this doesn't make great CVs, and the further it goes, the worse it gets. So we often want to have our CVs to be basically normal to the surface, but the surface has to have, say, 3 degrees of draft on it. So what we can do is say radial, and it gives us our draft based on this vector, but it keeps all of the CVs displayed across the surface as if it was normal to it. So that's pretty cool. To radial. Number 5 is how it trims the drafts in the flanges. So if we look here, these drafts are just intersecting. They're not trimming at all. So if I simply select those, I can say intersect flanges. I'll hit trim. And if we turn on the CVs, basically it just extended the draft and then trimmed those to be, to intersect cleanly. If I switch this to trim convert, it actually does a trim conversion on that, making it a natural boundary in the corners. And now it's very easy to manipulate and to take it into Class A modeling. So intersect flanges, awesome little tool. Number 6 is using the draft tool as an actual surfacing replacement tool. We're going to use the draft tool to create a wheel flat and then eventually a wheel arch. This technique gives us the CV placement that we want automatically. So we'll go in Y, and then for the draft angle, I'm going to switch this to 90, which displays all of our CVs outwards. just like that. Let's go ahead and turn that off, and we'll do that again. And this time we're gonna make it quite a bit larger, something like that. Actually, maybe not so large. And then we'll just use our align tool, select our draft, project, curvature in Y, add some more shape. And now we have a super cool wheel arch automatically. Very easy to use the draft tool to create this type of form. Number 7 is the ability to add proportional crown to our drafts. So we have our wheel arch. Let's go ahead and clean this up. And if we look, it's perfectly flat. I'll just query edit, go to proportional crown. Let's add quite a bit of crown. There we go. And it's set to end, which means that it takes the ends of that draft and tuck it away. And I can just flip that over if I wanted the other direction. Or I can switch this to central, and now you can see there's just a little bit of crown in the center of that draft where that wheel arch is. So proportional crown in draft is awesome. Number 8 is using the draft tool to define the centerline curves, centerline surfaces. I use the draft tool a lot of times when I'm creating a silhouette of a car. So in this example, we'll just fill in this panel, and typically, it might look something like this. Let's just reset the tool. We'll draft it out one direction. But I like to build all the way across the center line. Having a single surface makes it a lot easier to control the highlights and the reflections. So I'm just gonna choose double-sided, single surface, which gives me a single surface, and then I can still come in there and add in some crown or whatever I would like to do to give me a little bit of shape over the center line. Super easy, very easy to manipulate. Number 9 is draft from curve. It's kind of a strange name, so let's check it out. Right now I have a draft and it's built on a curve on surface. And you can see there's an isoparm right here. There's times when we're Class A modeling that we want to make sure that we're building absolutely the cleanest geometry possible. And so we'll use tools like fit curve, something like that, and that's very close to that surface. Let's delete our curve on surface. And if we need to make a draft that's normal or a flange that's normal to this surface, but we want to use a curve, we switch this to normal. Let's turn all of these options off. We can't use the curve. But if you just switch or turn on flange from curve, from surface, what I can do is I can choose a curve, hit accept, choose our surface, and it's going to use that surface as the normal information. So we're building off of the curve onto the surface, and yeah, so now I'll just move this wherever I want. You can see everything updating, but we would probably want to keep that right on the surface. So draft from a curve using another surface's normals. Number 10 is using the draft tool to create a character line. A lot of times I'll build these surfaces that aren't actually part of the final surface. I call them construction surfaces. And I'll take things like the freeform blend, and here I just have some offset curve on surfaces. Let's just connect these guys. And we'll just choose that one. I'm going to choose my draft. We'll connect these. I could have edged a line either way. So now I have the surfaces flowing to the draft, and now I can use the draft tool and use a numeric number to kind of address how much crown or how big this shape is. And so we can be very subtle. I can come in here and just add say 5, and it's basically a normal offset from the original surface that everything's going to blend to. Number 11 is a variable draft. And there's a whole slew of reasons you would use variable for sheet metal and dealing with different types of finishing around wheel arches and things like that. But with character lines, I can use a single draft over multiple surfaces. And if I just hold down Shift, you can see I can add another manipulator. And now, if I simply just make that smaller, now all of these parts are building to that draft or updating to that draft, and gives me a nice cowl hood or something like that. And I just want to show you something that's really cool. How I did this is I just trim converted the patch in the center. I'm only aligning, let's just turn off blend. I align positional to the draft, and then I come to blending and I add in extra rows of CVs. And by setting the blend factor to 0, all of those extra CVs align position or relative to the original one. So it gives me this kind of really cool way of controlling a line on the outside, and it automatically blends across the center line. Number 12 is using a variable over a complex shape. So here I'm in top view defining a pretty complex curve, or not really complex, but you know what I mean. And in addition, multiple surfaces. With the draft tool, if I had to make a linear transition from one side of this to the next, all I would have to do is bring these to the edges, and we'll just create one, drag one lower, and now it's a linear transition through this snake, this S shape in for this part. Now, if I just simply pull these towards the center, if you don't have the manipulators to the edge, they exit tangent to the dimension of the rest of the draft. Another really useful way of using variable draft to define an edge in space. Number 13 is a feature I'm really excited about. I think they've just introduced it. We're only at the tip of the iceberg of what's possible with this tool. It's metadata. Have you noticed all the tools are getting this new metadata feature? If I use Query Edit, I can right click on a surface, even though if there's no construction history, and you can see all of the settings used and the surface type for this particular draft. Now, if I have a surface selected, when I go into the draft, it's going to ask me if I want to load those options. I'll say yes, and then I'll go into this opening and choose that, hit go, and now I have this opening has the exact same draft settings as the original one. So even if my colleague, somebody I was working with, did the original one, I can match it after the fact. So that's pretty much most of the draft option. I hope you learned something. Draft is one of my favorite tools. It's definitely part of my core surfacing kind of toolbox. I hope you're able to integrate it in your workflow, and thanks a lot. Until next time, keep on surfing. Peace out. Later. I can't even talk.